Okay, it's recorded. Cool.
All right. So is it speaker like that? So
Yeah. Oh, wait. Hold on. Let me just do one thing. Let me get the order up so that we can get the transcription. Okay. And recording. Is it working? Yep. Okay. Yep. So Chris, Eddie, lost and found potential. Okay, cool. All right. Go.
Eddie Harron, my man.
How you going, bro? What's happening?
So today you and I are going to have a little chat, and it's been a chat, long time coming, man. It's probably a few months we've been trying to plan this and to think through. So for those watching, Eddie and I are working on this campaign called Australians for Mental Health, which is focused on mental health reform in Australia. When I first took over the role as campaign director, I, first thought about Eddie as the person I'd most want to work with on it, particularly because we've been friends for 15 years,
Something like that. Yeah.
something like that, and we've kind of gone on a journey together, and through both our lives, we've been sort of, friends and walk side by side as we go through the ups and downs of life. And one of those sort of ups and downs that we've both been on through our own mental health journey, and I think is probably why we're both very passionate about working on this campaign together to make sure that people have access to care and support in the way that we've been helped through our time. But we're doing as part of the campaign, what we're doing is getting people to share their experience through objects of lost and found potential as a result of their mental ill health and their mental recovery. And Eddie's very bravely decided to share his story with me today. So thanks so much, mate. Really
No
appreciate
worries,
it.
man. Really excited to share it.
So yeah, Eddie, maybe take us back to the beginning of your mental health journey. What was, when did you reflect on it, when did you first start to think, oh, there's something going on here, it's something that needs to be looked at?
Quite an early age, actually. I recognized that I was chaotic, emotionally or internally. Like, I remember in grade 8 wanting to go see the counselor. Like, what kind of grade 8er? Like, I pushed to see the counselor. Like, I need to see a counselor. So obviously early on I identified that. And in grade 9, because I got like Orator of the Year, and we had to do a speech. And guess what my speech was about? Child abuse.
Whoa.
Well, now I didn't get abused as a child at all. But the fact that like a grade 9er is identifying that as a topic kind of suggests that he is aware of some kind of chaos in his upbringing. So, yeah. And I went to boarding school. So one of my memories is like, I remember going, like, I was a weekly boarder. And so I would just memories of like going back to boarding school, having had like some fight with my parents or something. Yeah. And so, yeah, but as is typical, like in my early 20s, I started to exhibit like, depression and stuff, probably around 23. But my first major depression I got was after a big trip. I went around Asia for a year and a half, and I came back, and yeah, that was my like memory of my first major depression, like months and months in bed. And that really sort of kick-started, I suppose, this ongoing journey. And which I can proudly say now, I've been depression free. I'm 37 now, for about 2.5 years. So from about,
awesome,
yeah, it's been quite a long journey, but yeah, it feels good to say I'm in recovery. Yeah.
Do you feel like I remember, when I talked to my dad about it, he kind of he's a GP, and I was talking about, you know, going through periods of depression. He said, this is probably something you're going to live with forever, you know, and just to be aware of it and to manage it. And there was something kind of comforting in him saying that, to not feel like I have to be any different. It's just part of who I am. Do you feel that same thing, or do you feel like it's a different way for you?
I think that I've done so much work over that time. And I credit to many things, right? It's sort of like a little parts of a system that all kind of synergistically work together. So one part has definitely been like my meditation practice. I'd say that'd be a key thing. But it's just adding these things over the years, you know, and like 3 little things, then 4 little things, then 5 little things. And eventually, like, I have gotten to a point where I've done so many little things that all working together that has kind of popped me out into sort of a equilibrium of sorts. And that includes medication, and that just a whole spectrum of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something I'll always be susceptible to, that I always have to be aware of. But for now, you know, I feel like I've got a hold of it to a degree. Yeah.
If we kind of go back to, you know, when it first started coming on, before you found all these coping, you know, mechanisms and recovery strategies, and what did that feel like, you know, like being in bed for a few months? Like, what was do you consciously remember the experience, or you feel like you're someone
Well, I
else?
think some part of the brain, like there's like an amnesia that you just forget how hardcore it was, you know?
Yeah.
And even when I say months, like, was it months or was it even longer than that? Like, I don't really remember, because it's so hardcore. One of the patterns I noticed with is like, it was always, my pattern was about like 6 days I'd get depressed, and then I would call it the switch, where I would just wake up one day and I'd be okay. But that cycle would often happen in repeat. So like 5 days switch, few days start again. Like it varied, but yeah, there was always this like a switch point where I would just wake up and it would kind of be gone. Yeah. So,
and would you go in the other direction, you know, go from kind of being depressed into a sort of more manic phase?
yeah,
Like, would
well,
you sort of low and then high and then low again? And
yeah, I mean, I was diagnosed from the Black Dog Institute in 2011 with bipolar 2. So for those who aren't aware, bipolar 2 is where you exhibit hypomania. So it's like not mania where you think you're Jesus, but you know, you're pretty out there. And then you're depressed. I would like to say as caveat, like, and it's taken me a while to get to this stage. Like, I've gone through this journey of where bipolar like was my identity, then bipolar was like the curse, and then there wasn't bipolar. You know, that's bullshit.
yeah.
You know, and I've just gone through this whole phase of like different relationships with the term, because there's so much, you know, yeah, there's so many ways of looking at it and all these different perspectives of how people relate to it. But now I kind of hold it lightly. You know, I recognize that it describes a certain set of patterns in my behavior, and it'll be an ongoing journey of how I relate to it. And I think the bipolar community has been very helpful for me in terms of understanding what's going on, but it's just no longer my primary identity. And that's been liberating in itself. Yeah,
totally. Have you found like, so I've like, known you as a really close friend for a long time, and have seen all the different sides of Eddie and all the different energy states, and I love them all. You know, I love your friendship, and it's, you know, from my perspective, it's always been interesting because, you know, I love the very energetic Eddie, and you know, we talk ideas, and I think probably the world appreciates that more
yes,
than the opposite. And yet, when I've also got the very kind of lower, calm, very sensitive Eddie, it's always made me reflect on like being more attuned to those moments that we're in together,
Mm.
And it really like, and you kind of go up and then down and up and then down, and this is your life. Like even in small undulations, working with
Yeah.
you on this project, it's like, you know, week to week it does that. Um, how do you find the experience, you know, with your friends and the rest of the world, you know, interacting with work and interacting with other people
Yeah.
as your kind of brain just does that undulation?
Yeah. I mean, it requires like a lot of I keep crediting my meditation practice. Like everyone has their like one particular acupuncture point, and for me, like that's just the ability to kind of see the dynamics of what's going on and then be able to kind of communicate that, so that people know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
And yeah, yeah, man. I don't know. See now that I've mentioned the bipolar thing, like I'm also mindful that I also probably am just like a sensitive soul and sensitive nervous system. So that is both true and not true. I always need to like
yeah,
caveat anytime you describe
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So yeah, I think maybe like I'm getting better at setting the ground rules of like how I work, and not being
Mm,
ashamed about it a little bit more, and just comes with the territory, you know, with yeah, I'm not a robot. Like I'm just like a
totally.
chaotic, like who
Yeah,
has learned how to be centered more and more. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
That's, and it's been, and like I really enjoy working with you for that reason. Like I think, um, yeah, I really appreciate getting to work on this for both the like changes and the adaptation that is required to make sure that you feel supported and you work well, but also the like the insights that you bring into how we communicate our message, which you have on just a very personal, visceral level. And so bringing it into the kind of personal story, like, um, yeah, what's your object loss that you'd like to share today?
Yeah. It was quite profound to finally discover what it is, because you know I've been exposed to the concept, and I was sort of thinking about like what's mine going to be, and then our collaborator Alicia told us about what they did in the UK, and she showed us some of the things they did, and the first thing that she showed was a passport, and I just started crying, you know, like ding 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 ding, that's it. um and yeah, so the two passports. I would normally, I don't have them with me. I've got a picture, but it's actually 2+1 passports. So um, how do I explain? So once upon a time, uh, there was a period between like, I think it was like 21 and 23. Like I had three passports for a certain stage. So I had an Australian one, American one, and a Japanese one. Now, let me explain why that's significant. My formative life, you know, my mom's Japanese, my dad's American. I grew up in Japan, US, Australia, and a bit of New Zealand. So my kind of formative life was as this global kid. And the passport in our world is a kind of the modern artifact of a birthright. Like it's
Mm,
this artifact that tells you that you're, you know, these are your countries that you come from. These are your seeds. Um, and so, yeah, like a lot of my early, you know, my dad lived in Japan, so I'd always be on airplanes. Like one of my, like, you could call it like a rite of passage. The first time I came to Australia when I was 9, I came by myself. So I went and saw my dad, and then got on the plane from Japan to Australia. Mum was over here, and like
wow.
the pilot like let me sit on the, you know, cockpit and stuff.
Yeah,
Like I got in
yeah.
first class because there was like this 9-year-old going overseas. So like really deep formative things. And so like travel to me was just always part of my identity, life narrative, like whole being. Like when I went to college, I stayed at this when I went to University of Queensland, I stayed at this college called International House, where it was like 50% Aussies, 50% internationals, and it was like affiliated with Rotary. So, I mean, this is like my environment, right? Just people from all across the world, and lots of half-caste kids. And then, like I said before, I went on my global trip, and it was kind of a bit. I guess it was my first pilgrimage, so to speak. And went to Mongolia and like Tibet and Nepal, and like I kind of play it up a bit because it's a mythos. And there was times it was quite shit, but it was really important in terms of I'd reached that vision of being the adventurer that was like ingrained in me from 6. Then depression happened, right? And one of the things that was really enlightening for me and really helpful, I was reading the Productivity Commission report a lot. And dude, mental health has a huge consequence economically on your financial life. Duh. Like, holy shit. Because you're not making, I know it sounds so obvious, but like, wow. And so, yeah, I mean, because of my mental health, I haven't been able to make consistent money, or I'll make a little bit of money, right? And I'll spend it on travel, but then I don't have any money, so I have to come back, It's like, oh, cool, there's this conference in Hong Kong. Yeah, boom, go spend my money, but, none of this consistent thing. So, yeah, like when you look at the passport, so my lost and found is the passport in particular, because when you open the passport, what does it do? You have stamps and they represent where you've been. And my passports have been empty, or a little, I mean, a few stamps, but not to the degree that I envisioned. And I lost kind of the life that my kid wanted, or that I still do want. So that's been difficult. But through this process and like, all my deep work, I realized that part of my depression was grief. And I think grieving the life you didn't live, I feel like that's a part of a certain stage of adulthood where you accept that there was a life you didn't live and you grieve over that. And perhaps that's what I've, even this process has allowed me to identify that I was grieving. Cool. It's still very important to me. And if kind of to weave into the game thing, I think, Australian culture, the travel mythos, and something you do in your 20s. And if you don't do in your 20s, it's like gone. That's not necessarily the
or like
case.
that's the time when you
that's it.
Yeah. And
that's
then if
all
you miss
you
it,
got.
Yeah.
It's gone. The ship has sailed. So it was that, of course. I'm in Australia. Like that is the mythos, right? And so like, oh, the ship has sailed. Can't do it anymore. It's over. Like that's really, it's really hard when the thing you dream about is gone. But I think, yeah, I guess maybe the question, should I describe my loss a bit more? Because I'm kind of going into gain, but I thought maybe like I put some notes. I'm going to kind of just, because I want to describe to the audience, like just the textures of the loss. I mean, yeah. I'm sure I've described it, but I just want to like make sure. Yeah, I think just seeing those blank pages, and it doesn't help too. One of the, I guess, benefits for myself of this COVID era is that I've been able to process this, but I haven't gotten the Aussie FOMO because no one can travel. So I've been able to breathe a little bit, because the FOMO's in your face. Do you know how painful it is, right? When you're depressed and all you dream about is travel, and then you open your effing phone and you see all your mates going, best life, hashtag best life, or like travel. If you don't travel, you're not living your purpose. So like all that crap, all those hipsters, like, damn you. And then you know what? Like, just, I don't know. If you look back on my TEDx talk from 2011, that was just me wanting to do that, but not being able to do it, Um,
Mm.
so like that's why I kind of was in that digital nomad scene a little bit, like early stage, because I was seeing the potential of that, but not being able
Mm.
to do it, you know. Um, so yeah, so so this campaign is about looking at, you know, what we've lost, but also is what you've gained from your loss. I think that's an important part of what we're trying to show, that like in loss there is
Totally.
gain. So I think one of the things I've gained is just understanding that although the passports might yet to be stamped yet, what really I yearn for is like diversity of culture and experience. And that kind of ability you can find anywhere. So I still want to travel, but you know, it's my love of people that is underlying often the travel and adventure, and you can do that anywhere, you know.
Mm.
And then also
What
just
have you?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What have you gained through um your like experience of kind of mental illness and recovery? Like in terms of what have you learned about yourself? Not necessarily about like the process of traveling, but just on a psychological or spiritual level about you, Eddie Harron.
Mm, good question. Big question. What have I learned about me? Um, I think I don't I sometimes I don't reveal this enough to the public, but I'm a very deep spiritual person. I use that term very mindfully, and I think yeah, I think this whole mental health thing has been like a kind of spiritual accelerator of sorts, you know. Um,
Mm.
the benefit about being depressed and not being able to work is you sit around and read books and just contemplate and shit, you know? So I'm depressed and then I feel a bit better. So I'll just read some like Joseph Campbell or like, you know, just read a bit of Eckhart, like just surrounding myself with teachers as a way of healing.
Mm.
So that's that. I guess that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's one thing I've gained is like just having been forced to go slow and not being able to do anything, you know, luckily have the internet. And so just being able to kind of listen to the world's greatest teachers and stuff that's been, yeah, it's been awesome. It's been awesome.
It's a yeah, totally. And it like one of your passion areas is around time, right?
Yeah.
And it's a it's an interesting thing to think about mental like illness when you're like going through that and how that distorts your perception of time. Like for maybe people that are living a kind of conventional life or like kind of just, you know, normal like A type kind of brains, like just clock like my dad. I clock in at, you know, 5:30 in the morning, finish at 5:30 at night. You know, and do that for decades and decades. Perhaps that kind of subtlety of time is often lost because it's just you're sort of machinated into the process. Whereas if you aren't in that perpetual cycle, you have a greater kind of perception of time. I don't know if you think about
Oh,
that.
I wrote a journal entry once when I was thinking about time and mental health, and depression feels like you're stuck in the mud of the past to me. And when I've had panic attacks and anxiety, it's about like the future's coming or I can't get the future, and it's just like So
Yeah.
to me, there's a yeah, and then in that in between is like an inability to be present. So that's oversimplification, but for me, just having that like frame of like, oh, you know, mud of the past, sort of the electricity of the future, and just being able to look at what I was going through that lens has been, yeah, that's been helpful.
Mate, if you were to fast forward, you know, 10 years from now, 9 years to 2030, and you think about the help that you've received from different people and the changes you've gone through, what kind of system would you like to see us create? What kind of mental health system would you like to see for, future generations and coming through?
A system where people have care and support and systems to go through their process, however long that takes, whatever form that takes, because there's deep depth underneath the chaos. There's I think the psyche wants to integrate and become whole. And so if we can create spaces where people can kind of go through that and have like a whole modality of support to help them go through that. And I also just wish, look, my life's been saved by my family and friends. Like one of the reasons I've been able to navigate bad mental health systems and just the chaos of like bad service design, it's my friends, man. You've bailed me out so many effing times. And like friends, dude, actually, you know what? That's the gain of having a mental health condition. You get to receive the help of others in so many ways that, like, people picking me up at 3 a.m. when I'm sick, and just so many things. I mean, I do feel guilty about it a little bit, but it just inspires me to the importance of how you can help one person just in little ways, and how that matters. And we really can all make a difference to helping one another. Yeah.
I love that, man. It's been so good talking to you, brother. And I'm excited to see where we get to over the next year.
Yeah, man.
What happens, what we can achieve, and I think we share the same passion for this challenge in society. So it's good we're working on it together.
I'm excited to go deep into this and see what we can do together and with for the wider community.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, bro. Bye.